SBC Media.
Welcome to iGaming Daily, analysing the news from the betting and gaming industry all over the globe. Supported by SBC Summit Barcelona, the industry-leading conference bringing you the future of sports betting and iGaming.
SBC Summit Barcelona is where you can experience the entire global industry coverage under one roof. Join 10,000 industry professionals for 3 days of game-changing conversation and education. Get your tickets now at sbcevents.com.
The lottery sector faces inbound changes that will reshape the makeup of global gambling's most stable and ever-present business segment. 2024 will see Allwyn International take over the stewardship of the UK's national lottery, tasked with revamping its products, brand and retail offering to improve funds for good causes. In Europe, deep-pocketed French giant Groupe FDJ begins its international expansion by acquiring the Irish Lotto, and changes appear on the horizon in Italy as Lottomatica returns to the Milan Borsa. Furthermore, this week, Flutter will publish its H1 results, revealing the progress of its new Sizely unit in Turkey and Morocco. Beyond Europe, the winds of change sound for North and South America lotteries as operating firms see their monopoly rights tested by inbound regulatory changes and pressure to meet post-pandemic consumer demands. On the latest episode of iGaming Daily, sponsored by SBC Summit Barcelona, I am once again joined by the two Teds, or Tedwood as I like to call them, as Ted Omclay and Edward Menway join us. How are you both doing today? You okay?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks, James. Good to be here. Cheers.
Perfect. And how's the second part of Tedwood?
Very well, James. Glad to be here.
I don't think you're really impressed that I'm referring to as Tedwood, and I kind of want the whole industry to know you both as Tedwood moving forward.
we should do a dance at the Summit Barcelona.
If both of you just dye your hair blonde and stick it up with some shockwave gel, that'd be perfect.
It could work. It could work.
I think you'll both rock it, to be honest. Anyway, enough of that. That's for SBC Summit Barcelona for everyone. A little teaser for Tedwood on stage. But today, we're talking all things lottery. So, Edward, we'll come to you first. Why do you think lottery has kind of been slept on as a gambling segment in recent times?
As you explained in the introduction, lottery is the ever-present segment of gambling. And in that, it's a sector where there isn't as much commercial movement as other iGaming categories. A lot of that is down to how the commercial processes are in lottery, and the reality that lottery contracts are very, very hard to shift. And there's lots of political elements. The systems are huge in place, and the process in itself it's such a huge undertaking to deliver for a country, for a state that wishes to change lottery provider. So it's not so much that it's been slept on, it's just a reality of the business.
Want to add to that, we'll see?
Yeah, sure. I think, just as a sort of follow-on to that, it's as Ted mentioned with the commercial side of things, it's just not a very competitive sector in that you have it's dominated by big national lottery, state-backed companies that have this, as Ted said, state contract that usually lasts for, a minimum of 10 years. In some cases, you see, contracts of decades. So there's just not much movement because it's dominated by these big lotteries that have a lot of public faith in them because of the good causes mandate. And apart from that, the closest thing to a competitor they have is smaller sort of charity lotteries and society lotteries and things like that. So because of that, it's kind of a bit more ignored by some other private actors in comparison to betting and casino.
So, Edward, we'll come to you on this one. And Ted mentioned that these contracts can last for over 10 years. Why now are we seeing so many changes in the field? Is it just a coincidence all these contracts are coming to a conclusion at the same time, or is something happening that we need to be aware of?
The changes in lottery, or what we're seeing kind of, as you mentioned, it being a coincidence, is that governments, we're going through, especially in Europe, we're going through kind of a generation review of a lot of markets' gambling laws, and in that is intertwined what is the position of the lottery as a product. So yes, lotteries are monopolized, but at the same time, they have a political mandate to fulfill, to raise money for good causes. And is that being done effectively by the operators? Also, there's kind of internal changes to the market within itself. What we've seen from the supply side and the technology side is that we used to have these gigantic tech Goliaths, your IGTs, your Intralots, your scientific games, and they've all revised down their products. So they've either gone and started to sell off kind of units, or they're kind of refocusing on their core product of lottery. Lottery is a very lucrative business, right? However, what we've seen in the last 10 years is that it's not very good at integrating new products. So I think from an investor side, a lot of from an investor perspective, they've kind of revised what is the purpose of a lottery company, right? But how can it be effective towards the modern consumer too? And what is the proposition? Is it just simply surprise lottery, or can it compete in other fields? So there's a lot of elements being asked of lottery as a category, as a product, and who it services.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of a really perfect thing to say. There's a lot of things being asked now about lottery, and no more than Allwyn. They've taken over the National Lottery, and Ted, I'm going to come to you. Can you just explain the importance of this takeover for us? Because as far as I've known, it's always been Camelot.
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah, you've kind of already hit the nail on the head there already, James. That's the reason this is significant, is because as we mentioned earlier, the big thing about lottery companies and lottery operations from a commercial standpoint is these huge decades-long contracts. The UK is now putting an end to it. The only contract the National Lottery has ever had, I think, was it Camelot have held it since 1994. The company was set up specifically to run the National Lottery, and that's what's so sort of seismic about this change, is the fact that this company that was set up to manage the lottery has done for the past 3 decades, is now been phased out in favour of this a private multinational company, which is already active in various other European lottery markets, as a national lottery operator. So that's really what's significant about that. And I guess a lot of people might be looking at it to think, will this be replicated in other European markets, or in fact further afield?
And Edward, we'll come to you. I'm just going to a follow-up question on this. With Allwyn now replacing Camelot, what can we expect to be any different compared to Camelot's reign over 3 decades?
This is a $1 million question. Towards the end of Camelot's stewardship, there was a lot of political conflict, especially in it being owned by the Canadian Pensions Fund. The Tory party did not like that. Also, I think back-to-back years it failed to increase funds for good causes, so it got lambasted in the press. And this is the challenge for Allwyn. It's how does it revamp basically all elements of lottery, provide kind of a stronger digital offering, revamp its retail system, and also I expect kind of a rebrand of the National Lottery itself in terms of marketing. So that's going to be a huge contract. I think there's going to be a lot of eyes on the transition of the contract, because just governments don't normally do this. And again, another thing to highlight, 2024 is going to be an election year, and this is actually one of the few it's one of the few mandates that the Conservative Party has gone through with. And if this falls flat on its face, it's not going to look very good for the parties involved.
Cool. And Ted, we'll come to you. In the intro, I mentioned about Groupe FDJ, as they've the French company, they've expanded and acquired the Irish Lotto. Can you just kind of, in your own thoughts, explain a bit about FDJ's new ambitions moving forward? Yeah,
this is really interesting, really, because as you mentioned, FDJ is starting to really broaden their international scope. They're historically, obviously, the French state-backed monopoly there. They run the national lottery. They're also one of the leaders in sports betting and iGaming in France. And now this state-backed firm is now expanding its international reach by acquiring it's Premier Lotteries Ireland, PLI, who interestingly have also been owned by the Ontario Teachers Pension Plan, as Ted mentioned, with regards to who owned Camelot. Sorry, as Ted mentioned, who did own Camelot. So that shows that they're sort of getting rid of a lot of their lottery holdings, which are now getting bought out by European firms. And Groupe FDJ, I believe, now that they've bought the Irish Lottery, there's still 10 years left on that contract, so they've got a significant inroad there. They're also doing a lot of international B2B tech partnerships with some other lotteries. I believe they've signed a deal with IGT at the moment to sort of trade some different products between France and Italy. And they also bought out, I may butcher the name of the company here, but is it Z-Turf, Z-E-Turf? Edward, help me out here, please, sorry.
Z-Turf.
Yeah, they also bought out Z-Turf, which is a Dutch betting brand specifically focused on horse racing.
I said the way you're pronouncing it sounds like surf and turf.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, second guessing myself a bit on that one. So they've bought out this brand, which also then links back to what we were talking about earlier of how lotteries are trying to broaden their product scope and getting more involved in sports betting and trying to compete with some of the bigger names in that side of things. So FDJ's international journey is really quite interesting and could maybe be telling for how some lottery companies, the journey they might go on themselves later on.
Yeah, a lot of eyes are going to be on FDJ, and FDJ's had an interesting journey. Its IPO in 2020 got interrupted by COVID. They had, I wouldn't say difficult, but they had 2 years of recovery from that process, and they've got deep pockets. And I think it's going to be a company that's going to do a lot of activity on the M&A front. There's going to be a lot of speculation surrounding its moves, how it expands into new markets. I think its investor base wants an aggressive expansion.
Cool. And we're running a bit out of time, so we're going to quickly go over Lottomatica. So Edward, can you just explain kind of what's happening there, kind of the journey they've had?
Again, Lottomatica is kind of disentangling itself from it comes out from a 2-year kind of disentanglement from IGT. So it used to be kind of an Anglo-Italian American company. It's now just gone back to its singular focus of being in the lottery and relisting on the Milan Borsa. So it's got a high level of focus out in Italy, but again, it's another company that will be looking for contracts. Will be looking for international B2B contracts, looking to expand into new markets. I think it's targeting North Africa as well. So again, a lot of activity in European lottery.
Cool. And kind of for the listeners out there, just give a little bit of background into this podcast. When we come up with the topics, Edward sends me nice little notes, and in this little note it says Flutter Turkish delight, like the sweet or the chocolate. So, Edward, tell me why you put Turkish delight. Go on, explain that one.
Okay, in that note, and I think that this is really, really being slept on by the industry, is that Flutter and Flutter International has legit access to the Turkish market, right? Which is, I think, an El Dorado market for the industry. It's where a lot of operators and a lot of leadership would, they would love to be involved in that market. They would love to have access to Turkish consumers. Again, a huge gambling market, and I think that that is going to be prioritized by Flutter. You're going to see that in the results, just the strength of what that market can add to the bottom line, which is what that PLC need, which is what PLCs at this moment in time really need. Expand their profit lines, expand their EBITDA, and that's what Turkey's going to do for Flutter. The other thing is that, again, You have to see how well they integrate the Sisal unit, which will expand them within kind of new territories and a new segment in lottery for what is a company that plans to be the most valued gambling PLC by the end of the year.
Cool. And Ted, do you want anything to add to that? You want to beat Ted's Eldorado comment, because that was a good comment.
Yeah, I think I'll struggle to follow up Ted's Eldorado comment, but I just would like to add what Flutter's doing with its Sisal holding, obviously acquired not too long ago. It's kind of an interesting contrast to how some of these established lottery providers are now trying to get into betting and gaming. Flutter is a historic, betting and gaming giant active across various markets throughout the world that is now using Sisal to get more involved in the lottery side of things. And as Ted has already laid out, is really targeting Turkey and Morocco with that one. Has obviously got some tenders there. So this maybe this could be the point that sort of Flutter becomes like a jack of all trades of gambling, with its betting, gaming, and lottery holdings active across various established prominent markets.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And just the final one to round up the podcast. Again, it was mentioned in the introduction that there's kind of a wind of change around North and South America lotteries. The monopoly rights are being tested, and definitely in Brazil, we're seeing a lot of regulatory changes coming into play, but again, across both Americas. Edward, can you delve into that for us? Can you highlight some of the issues or some of the things that are developing in North and South America?
Okay, so writing the notes for this podcast, I mean, the element of North and South America is that I think you're going to view a lot of the European firms that have kind of recapitalized in lotteries. They're now going to look at how can we take over North American or South American contracts, not only for lotteries, but also to give them provide kind of tech or system infrastructure for sports betting. As we all know, the South American betting market will be completely different to the European one. And I think the assessment there is that for the successful countries or for the successful markets, it will be the guy who can the companies that can provide the best retail and digital offering. So combined kind of omni-channel offering, who can do that. So I think there's going to be a lot of competition for South American contracts, and then yeah, I mean, I think that's it's as simple as that. It's where the market movement's going to come from.
Cool. And any movement in that market, no doubt, both Tedward will be across it on both SBC News and Lottery Daily, and anything that we've spoken about today in the podcast, I'll put a link in the description below. But on that note, I'm going to shoot because I'm going to get an Allwyn lucky dip. Ted, Edward, thank you for joining me, and to the listeners out there, thank you and goodbye.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of iGaming Daily, brought to you in conjunction with SBC Summit Barcelona, being held at the Fira Barcelona Montjuic on the 19th to the 21st of September. If you want to find out more about some of the subjects raised today, feel free to explore any of the sites in the SBC News network, or check out the latest edition of the SBC Leaders magazine. Happy reading.